Ethnography Project, interview number 1, student number HO112196, D304, B. Davis. Would you like to tell me about your life then, Mr. Lampkin?
Council school, most people left there. Moved on through the primaries to the secondary stage. I got a scholarship then to the secondary school, and at that time I was head boy of the school. I was head boy for 2.5 years, a bit unusual, because normally the head boy maximum at the year. I think I was best at maths. I used often to get exams, that's all. Then I went to technical college. I went to Liverpool Technical College with the intention of being a mechanical electrical engineer.
How old would you be then?
18, approaching 18, say 17. And then when my 18th birthday was approaching, as my 18th birthday approached, the war was then on, 1940, and on my 18th birthday I joined the RAF. I've tried for once before, and my father wouldn't let me go until I was 18, joined the RAF as a wireless operator because of my training with the automatic telephonic company on radio and what have you. Anyway, I went to Blackpool for training, and they wanted pilots, they were obviously picking people out from the courses, pilots, and I was accepted for training as a pilot. At this stage I got up to about 18 words a minute at Morse and that sort of thing, off the drill. And off I went to Newquay in Cornwall for ITW, later to EFTS at Sealand near Chester, and then to Canada for SFTS. My wings on Oxfords, came back to England. We'd been bombed in Liverpool.
At your house?
My house was destroyed. And that was when I was at ITW, the house was destroyed and they sent for me, I came home. Nobody was killed really, but the house was destroyed and what a distress. And during the raids I'd seen one of our own night fighters over Liverpool. And I suppose it must have been a Blenheim or it must have been probably a Defiant, something like that. I wanted to go to night fighters, so I made up my preference. And they sent me to 5102 Euro Cranfield in Bedfordshire. And my flight commander, incidentally, was the VC, Baltimore VC. I then went on to turbine nights, flying with Hurricanes and Havocs. Havocs had huge great searchlights in the nose, radar, no guns. And the Hurricanes flew in formation at night. A lot of people don't know about this. And they used to shoot down the enemy that you got near to, because the radar...
They used to light them up, you mean?
Yeah, searchlights.
Is that right?
And the Hurricanes flew outside the beam and flew on to shoot them down. But of course this was necessary because the radar was very poor. The minimum range, it was all right at about 1,000, but minimum range became all over the show. There were missing bombers all over the sky. So that's what that was for. But of course, as soon as the Mark V radar came in, which was very good at minimum range, that was a dish, an evolving dish, then...
Well, that's fitting in the aeroplane, I mean, fitted in the aircraft.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Then it became obsolete, and those squadrons were disbanded. This would be at the time of Dieppe, and our Hurricanes went to Dieppe. Incidentally, in passing, the flight commander on that squadron was Nettleton, the VC, whose VC has just been sold for
well, that's
all
interesting,
that money.
isn't
Yes,
it?
he was my flight commander.
What year would that be, about 1942?
1940, that would be 1940. 1942, that was, yes, of course, year of Dieppe, that's right, 1942.
Things are happening quite fast then for you, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Then at the end of 42, these squadrons were disbanded. I'd been very interested in SBA at the time, blind approach landings and things like that, and done a bit of that, flying these havocs. And they then sent me to Upavon, to the flying instructor school, to become a flying instructor. And then I went for the whole, it was a good plan really. We'd come off operations and night fighters, and then for the whole of 1943 I was flying Blenheims as an instructor at an OTU, and the idea was that people coming back from the Empire training schemes, Canada, New Zealand people coming over, Australians, South Africans and people from training in these American were coming back and not having any idea about the navigation and the coping of beacons and things in Britain. And we gave them a short course. Basically, you taught them to fly Blenheims quickly, and you did everything with them and then sent them to do the same thing solo. Especially at night, you got them up to night, and I can remember that you had to fly with everybody before you did anything. And I remember one night doing 6 trips and having 55 minutes total time in my logbook, all in different aeroplanes, flying with them around the circuit and landing and then sending them off solo, because the scheme was you had to fly with them first before they could go off by themselves every trip, which was a very good idea, and it worked too, because it's transported them really from being raw pilots from flying along railway lines to having like something about beacons and night flying and hooded lights and blackouts and things like that. And that was a good idea. Towards the end of 43, I then went back into operations. I went on to bullfighters, which I'd flown before. I went to 141 Squadron, a night fighter squadron, and changed to mosquitoes.
What sort of mosquitoes were there?
Well, mosquito 2s and then 6s and 25, but all of them night fighter mosquitoes. By this time, of course, the raids over Britain were getting less and less, and there was very little for the night fighters to do. And as soon as ever Fighter Command could get their ministry to let them, they sent intruders over, and that's what I did. I went into a 100-group bomber support operations. Night fighting over, the idea is you flew with the bomber stream, it came out from the bomber stream to one side and went slowly, flaps down or whatever. Wait for somebody to come up behind and turn around and have a go at it. And this has worked out very well. Sierra Mask, one little fellow named Graham, who became the top scoring night fighter pilot, about 32 destroyers.
As many as that?
Yeah. And that was the idea. Anyway, that went on, and the high-level stuff got less and less as we started to win air superiority, and we started doing low-level raids where we go over the aerodromes suspected of having night fighters flying from there, and we tried to keep them quiet by bombing it, putting a bomb down every now and again, and shooting up anything we saw, and trying to look for radar or whatever. And it was on one of those trips, on the 30th of November 1944, that I was shot down.
Oh, you remember the date very well.
Oh, yeah. I was taken, first of all, to a German police station.
Whereabouts did that happen?
Just across the border, 20 in that area, Geilenkirchen, in that area, Quackenbroek.
Quite close to Holland, is it?
Well, quite close to the Dutch border. In fact, I thought I was over the Dutch border, but that was the bite into Holland that Germany has, you know. And then I was taken to the interrogation centre at Oberusel near Frankfurt. And
that's a long way down there, was it?
Oh yes, a long way down. It took some time to get there. And then, after being in solitary confinement and questioning and all that stuff, I went in a cattle truck for 6 days, I think it was, right up to the Baltic coast near Stettin, a place called Bar, Stalag 1. And I was there till the end of the war. But of course, before the war ended, the Germans left. They wanted to surrender to us as long as they were British prisoners of war, and that wouldn't have that. Unconditional and nothing. And the Russians came in. And that was interesting, and nothing more. So I didn't get back there. We cleared the local aerodrome, bombs and things, mainly by towing the bombs on long ropes, captured cars, and cleared the aerodrome. And then
Well, just in case they went off, is it? Or something?
Well, they were likely to go off, of course, because they'd be left armed to stop people landing on the aerodrome. That was what it was all about. And we cleared that lot, and then the great day arrived when the fortresses flew in to take us home, 25 in each airplane.
Very good.
Then. Talk for hours about that
Interesting.
setup. It was very interesting at the time. I think the thing in life, if you're thinking of stories of life, are that when we got off that train, well, we've been in this cattle truck for all these days.
This is going to Frankfurt, wasn't it?
Well, no,
going from Frankfurt to near Stettin somewhere.
Yeah. We were in terrible condition. Of course, most of us have been injured in some way or other. We've been in solitary confinement, had very poor rations and whatever. And we're in a terrible state, as you might imagine. Walking out to this prisoner of war camp, and not 6 months later, when the fortresses were flying overhead, we marched down through that same town, same people, to the aerodrome, all in step and holding ourselves best we could in the dirty and horrible uniforms we got. Did our best, of course. And the same people who were calling us terrorfliegers and spitting at us 6 months earlier were now waving to us, smiling to us, saying, how nice, which I think...
change of heart. Yeah.
Indeed, yes.
What did you think of them, those sort of people who were doing that? Why did you... I suppose you didn't really care too much, did you?
The Russians had got them, and they were very, very frightened of the Russians, of course. But I think it's perhaps typical of the Germans. Even now, we can talk to the Germans and get them having a few drinks. If they're winning, they're marvellous. If they're losing, that's bearable. Now, then we got home. We were flown into Ford on the south coast and taken by train up to the lovely indoor sports place at Wolverhampton,
Cosford, is
Cosford,
that?
yes.
Is that Cosford?
And those big sheds were set out to deal with us because if we landed, we had a big long row of telephones for us all to go and ring home with each day. And I remember having 2 baths, one after the other. And they doused us with anti-louse powder and everything. Anyway, I had a bit of trouble with boils and things like that. And then it didn't seem long after, as I said, it wasn't many weeks, that they had me in flying training, and I was posted to Curtin Lindsay, Hibblestone, Curtin Lindsay. Obviously I'd been on turbine nights before, and I became an instructor at the Spitfire OTU there. I became chief ground instructor, and then the whole unit was disbanded and we moved to form an OTU come AFU at Valley, the 1946 I'm talking about now. I instructed there for a bit. I was an instructor too at near Stoke. What was that called again? That's closed since.
Near where? Stoke?
Near Stoke-on-Trent, yes. I was an instructor there for a while on Oxfords. And then I went on to Harvards and Spitfires and things, and went to Valley where I became the chief ground instructor there. Still flying, of course.
So you've done quite a lot of flying, really.
I went to, we're now talking about 1947 time, and I went to 47. I went to an OTU flying Mosquitoes, night fighters again, became flight commander of squadron at number, which OTU is that now again? Anyway, it's an OTU at Leaming in Yorkshire.
Well, you were only be about 25 then, weren't you? 26.
Oh, yes.
So you've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah. And then I became the squadron commander of number 3 squadron, that was with Wellingtons and Martinets, and took over from Styx Gregory, who was a very well-known RAF character and was the navigator of Bob Graham years ago. Had a few happenings there. I was there for 3 years. And that was where I had the escape of a lifetime, I suppose. I thought the one when I landed in Germany and it was dark at night and got away with that. This one was... I took off with a fellow named Farah following behind me. We were going to give night fighter demonstrations to 2 pupils, one of whom was a New Zealand flying officer I had in my airplane.
What sort of aircraft was it?
Mosquito. Night fighter Mosquito. And Don Farrow was coming along the runway behind me to night. Do you ever remember the name Ford Hutchison?
No,
An air
never heard
trafficker
of
in
that.
this business, just about to retire. Now, he was the air traffic controller on duty at the time. And as we left the ground, the airplane went on fire, Mosquito. And I thought of trying to get it round and down, and there was no hope there. It was well on fire. And I got the other fellow to bail out. And being a pilot, he nearly went without his parachute too. Fortunately, it was in his way and he clipped it off. And he bailed out and I went out behind him. And we reckoned, or they reckoned, it went into this book of parachute escapes. It was the lowest anybody had ever got out of a Mosquito.
Interesting.
And both to get out, because you know a Mosquito was virtually impossible.
Is
to
that
get
the
out.
door in the floor?
Yeah, inside.
Yes.
And anyway, Fort Hutchison, as I came down in the parachute, this farmer was feeding his pigs and buckets in his hand. And as I landed, I said, "Can I use your phone? I've just bailed out." And he said, "Yeah." Through there, so I went into his lounge and phoned their traffic control. This Fort Hutchison said, "Who?" So I said, "Tony Lampkin." I said, "Nonsense! I can see your airplane's on fire." It was just off the end of the runway. That was at Kettering. Anyway, I always remember the farmer coming in his wellies and feed buckets, into the telephone to say, "You've done what?" Anyway,
interesting that, isn't it?
anyway, that went. I finished there and went to the night fighter leaders school. I'd already done night fighter leaders course some time before. I can't remember when that was, and I was selected to go on the staff of the night fighter leader school at CF. He was the Central Fighter Establishment, Australian in Norfolk. I was there for about 3 years.
So you've done quite a lot of travelling around, really. Even after the war, you did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I went to Boscombe Down to do the trials on the Meteor Night Fighter. And I did a bit of the trials flying on the Venom. Oh, and then I went to Cortisol. As they started a scheme of getting experienced pilots, I suppose navigators as well, to be operations officers for the wings, which we had then in fighters, and to run the operations side, scrambles and all the rest of the interception and technique and whatever. And I did that for a couple of years, still flying though. And that's where I met Dennis Gabriel was there. I used to fly with Dennis Gabriel quite a lot.
Oh, interesting. That.
And then from there I went to Fighter Command, Communications Squadron. And then I went out to Malta and commanded the armament practice camp, which was on Takali in Malta. And then when the thing was starting at Suez, before Suez, of course I was posted to take
When would that be? 1950 time?
56 when I was
56.
55, 56, something like that. I went to Cyprus. I was there for 3 years. I commanded the 2nd Tactical Air Force. No, I'm sorry. The Air Headquarters Levant Communications Squadron, flying all around the Middle East. That was,
That was quite nice.
but we
that.
had meteors as well as part of the thing. And so we had a lot of people coming to fly with us, and we flew, and we had banner towing and all the rest of it all tied up with this thing. That's why they posted me on, because I'd done pilot attack instructing and done the courses, had the armament practice camp and all that. Oh, incidentally, we trained the Lebanese Air Force for a bit. I had
I
several
wonder if there are any of
visits,
those left now.
several visits to them, and they were very nice with us, but of course, but that was very interesting. Of course, I thought Cyprus was marvellous. It was the most beautiful place.
I've never
Lots
been
and
there.
lots of flying, and the weather was always good. But of course, I did so many trips round Albania, across to Baghdad, and down the Gulf, and across to Suez. Of course, I was at Suez. And it was so interesting. I think the thing that interests me, and I think perhaps something that might interest you in your psychology, is that we left Iraq, and I used to go through Havana as a staging post. And I don't know whether you've ever been there, but it was the most beautiful place, built out of foul, horrible, grey desert. Everybody thinks of it being lovely sand, but it isn't, of course. It's that horrible, grey, dirty, filthy rock as well. And we'd made this beautiful place of trees, lawns, lovely buildings. There are doves flying, and we didn't let people shoot there and all the rest of it. And it was lovely.
What's it like now?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. The point that I'm trying to make is that I then, after we'd left, I kept going in there on these staging points for special trips. And each time you went, you found that the tiles outside the officers' quarters were slightly less polished. You found that the water was only let in once every 3 days instead of every night as it used to be. The roses weren't as nice. The lawns were different. The pie dogs were coming up to the edge of the officers' mess quarters where that never would have been allowed. And so on. It just drifted down. The swimming pool was not as clean as it had been, not by a long chalk, and so on and so on. And reading what goes on now, I can imagine precisely what's going on in Baghdad and Iraq. But of course, I did enjoy Baghdad, and it was nice to see all that was going on. My navigator at the time, who later became the navigator on the Queen's flight and was killed, and one of the very few people ever killed on the Queen's flight was a squadron leader navigator. And whenever we went around the Middle East, he used to have this, like most Arabs have, this little piece of leather as a bag, and he used to collect his own pearls, and he had a graduated piece of card, and he was looking for the pearls. In fact, in the end, he did get a full string of pearls for his wife.
I've never heard of that.
Oh, yes. A lot of people just pick up little ones. Nearly all Arabs have a little bag of pearls, because around that part of the Gulf, they pick these up and
just going to the market, looking for them, or asking
oh no, you meet
people,
them on the aerodrome. So you just mention on the aerodrome that you're interested in. About 10 of them would turn up, and so on. Places like Sharjah and Basra and places like that. And I could speak for hours about those sort of places. They're very interesting if you knew what I haven't.
What do you think about the people there? Were they?
Well, that's it. But there's so many people of so many different kinds. The thing that distressed you was, of course, the smell. And seeing the kids, the little girls, who could hardly wait to be grown up enough to put those horrible yellow leather things on their faces. And they're not supposed to look upon a man. But
did they look forward to that or not?
Oh, yeah. It seemed obvious that the kids were, this is like our kids getting their driving license. They're grown up now. Horrible. But, you could see all the, I suppose the thing that's in the back of your mind now is the thing about religion. And I remember my father used to say many years ago that religion's a curse. When you look around the Middle East, of course it is. Everything is ruled and organised by religion, which of course is man-made in its way of making rules for this and the other.
Do you think they need those kind of rules out there, or any more than we do? Or?
The cutting off hands to stop thieving and that being done by a doctor who's been trained by us, perhaps, is, in my view, I can spit when I hear of that sort of thing going, no, that's wrong. Yeah. But different standards, I think the standards should apply throughout the world for anybody, and I think it'll come to that in the end anyway.
Well, it'll be now by about 1960, I suppose, now.
Later than that. We're now in... oh, no, we're not. Of course we're not. No, 1983 now. It'll be about 1958 now, wouldn't it? 59 perhaps. Then came back from the Middle East, and the AOC, whose flight I had then, came back to England looking desperately for a flying job, of course, because there weren't so many of them. And I had a signal to come to Germany, where the AOC had taken over as AOC of Air Headquarters, Germany, 2nd Tactical Air Force, and had asked for me, and I was posted as a flight commander of the Headquarters, 2nd Tactical Air Force Comm Squadron. And again, I enjoyed that very much, flying every day.
That's nice.
Commanded the squadron as well, and I enjoyed that very, very much. And I soldiered on in that for, again, 3 years. It was lovely. I was at Food and Laughs with a lot of flying, up and down to Berlin's offers we liked all around the zone and SILT, and lots of NATO flying and so on, and I enjoyed that. At the end of that, time was up and I was posted back. I couldn't get a flying job, went to Air Ministry. I remember the bloody fellow that interviewed me, so named Peter Latham, who later, well, he was well known. And
So that was another important sort of feature for you. You even remembered his name quite well, because you couldn't get another flying job out of him.
no, I didn't like him either. And I was sent off to air traffic control training at Shawbury, and was posted to Marham.
That's
At the
in
time
there.
I was at Marham, they were repairing the runways completely, and we closed down and we moved to Cottesmore. And it was while I was there, oddly enough, the business of years ago, bailing out of the Mosquito, I was controlling a chap on practice PAR approaches in a Victor, and he called Mayday, and it's about 2 miles or something like it. He went straight down my tube and into the ground, and I saw on PAR the parachutes all in the sky, on radar.
Not
I
bad.
rushed to the window to see them all coming down. The airplane went straight down into the ground. And that was, again, the only time that any V-bomber ever got all of its crew out safely.
How many people were in that? About 4?
7.
7?
Mm.
7?
Yeah, they all came out.
That's quite good,
And,
isn't it?
I think it was 7. I'm not sure how many, but I think there were 7 people in that.
That's Cottesmore, that's East Midlands area, isn't it?
Yeah.
In
Anyway, that was due to some sort of reversal of control due to some electrical problem. And all airplanes were altered after that. As they were for that Mosquito years ago, they found a fault, and it explained how there'd been unexplained accidents in Mosquitoes. It just happened. Anyway, then I was at Marham when this thing came up about looking specially for air traffic controllers with experience if they were pilots, and I was over age. Now to get out, to get into the job, first of all I was accepted, and then due to absolute finger trouble in the orderly rooms or the stations I was at or whatever had happened, they discovered that they didn't want to let me out, and they said, no, we trained you in your air traffic control and radar control, all the rest of it, we don't want to lose you, and so on. And I said, well, look, I've got this job until I'm 60, and I would like to go to it, and since you've made me be an air traffic controller against my wishes when I'm really a pilot, I might as well be a proper air traffic controller now. Anyway, I then lost 10% of my pension because of that, and I think that was wrong, and that's smart, I hate that, I don't like that, that was wrong. Anyway...
You got out, you came out of the air.
Came into this business, and that's what I've been...
Until you retired.
August the 1st, yes.
Yeah. Now you're looking around for something else.
I'm it's silly just to vegetate. I don't want to do that. I really do things.
What, you joined the Air Force in 1940, was it?
Yeah.
And you came out in 1963.
3, is it? Yeah, about right.
And what sort of ranks did you hold? You started off as an airman.
I went right through. I was an AC2. I don't think I was ever an AC1. An LAC. Sergeant. Flight sergeant. I was a warrant officer, one of the youngest warrant officers in the service. What would I be, about 19, I suppose. 18 or 19, something like that. I well remember that when I was at Spittlegate, my warrant came through, and I went to the stores, and they got a uniform that fitted me that was ordered for somebody else who died or been killed or something. And it was smooth uniform. And whereas the only 2 people on the station with smooth uniforms and warrant officers were the station warrant officer from me. And you can imagine how that was taken in the sergeant's mess. Me, about 19, in smooth blue uniform and gloves.
Yeah.
And all the old Harrys.
Yeah, they wouldn't all like that, would they?
No. And then a pilot officer, of course, and went through the ranks.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, it's interesting, that.
But make no mistake, I enjoyed the RAF very, very much. I liked the comradeship and friendliness and happiness. Although at times, of course, it was very hard going. And at times, too, you get the type of CO who was nasty. I didn't like him, obviously. You couldn't see that I mean, you knew he was wrong in the way he was doing things, but it's the same with any job, I suppose, that some people aren't really, and you know they're not really the right people for the job, but you've got to serve with them, and that's it, and you've got to have loyalty and what have you.
A lot of that's sort of based on loyalty, isn't it? Even though you don't.
Loyalty's vital.
I mean, you feel strongly about the system, you know, about the ranks and so on. You thought it was a good system.
Well, I'll
for
tell
what
you
it
what,
was
though,
for.
Ben, I think that loyalty, people talk about loyalty, and usually it's weak people talk about loyalty, and they say it's, you've got to be loyal to this, that, and the other. But loyalty goes both ways, up and down. And too often I've found that the loyalty is going up all right, and not so bloody much is coming down, and I've seen that a few times in my time. The loyalty is loyal, not just up, it's going to be down as well.
You think some people might use it as a tool above you to ensure they get your support as well? That's
Well,
what,
I suppose if you're a leader and a commander, I've always managed to get the support of the people who work for me. And I think if you're a leader, it's your job to get the best out of your people. But if you are on a building site, which I've seen a bit of that just lately too, where all you're trying to do is to drive your people to do the best, well, you might as well be back in the days of the Romans with lashes. And that's not the way to lead and manage people, I don't think.
well, by example, you mean is better.
Well, I mean, not always by example. I mean, example's good. But for instance, if you're in charge of a gang of bricklayers, you couldn't expect to be doing the job anything like as well as them. You just couldn't give them an example, set any form of example. But if you've got loyalty and respect, I think that they would do a better job. I mean, it's arguable always to me whether you should drive people or whether you should lead them. I think some people need driving and I think others need leading. But by and large, if you've got intelligent people, I think you've got to lead them, you mustn't drive.
Well, you can explain to them why. If you explain to someone why something's got to be done, you think that in a lot of cases that's going to work.
If they're intelligent people, yes.
But not always.
Oh,
It
no.
doesn't always work.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I think the clever leader is the person that recognises which is the right way in which circumstance.
But the one who knows exactly how to deal with the problem, to deal with the people anyway.
That's right.
That's the vital bit, isn't it? How to deal with those
To
particular
recognise
people or
the type-
person.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
what I
I
think.
think
That's why I think he's got to be a psychologist to a great degree. And I think too that, it's been talked about a lot lately, but I'm firmly of this opinion in promotion, that you don't promote somebody because they're good at the job they're doing. I think you should promote them to do the next job, promote them to be this, that, or the other. But again, I'm a little bit against the high flyer type of system, especially in forces or in civil service. And I say this because if in this business you pick somebody who's 36 and make him a leader, pick him out as a high flyer, you think he's a bright lad, and mostly he's got that because his personal commanders think the world of him. Maybe Crawley might have been doing anything. But say he's chosen at 36 and he is a steward, you've got him for 24 years.
that's true.
Whereas if you promote him when he's proven himself and he's very experienced and he's 56, if he's a steward, you've only got him for 4. Well, you might argue then you've missed him from being a good leader for all those other 20 years.
Yes.
But at least, you've got to look at both systems and think about it very hard before you promote a flyer, because some of the flyers aren't so marvellous.
I mean, in this business like the civil service sort of thing, or in the services, why do you think people are promoted when they're not suitable? Is it because the people who are doing it want someone who they like to get on with, or
Yeah, I'm sure that's so, yes.
or people who think along the same lines as?
Person. Let's face it, if you have somebody with you play golf with, and you know him to be the good chap, has a few pints with you and all that sort of thing, and he's a great pal of yours, there is a tendency to think he's a much better person than somebody who doesn't play golf or doesn't drink.
That's true.
Personally, I drink and play golf, but you know what I mean? You've got to, there is a tendency for the personality cult to come, isn't there?
Right.
You're choosing the people you like, and you step down the people you don't like. But again, I think an awful lot of people have been promoted, the wrong people, the leader not knowing them well enough. I think that's one of the biggest problems It's in this business that you've no idea what the hell is leading you. I mean, you've got your immediate boss, and that's it. And you don't see anybody.
But in some jobs, people don't really need leaders, do they? They're quite happy to get on with their job, providing they know what they've got to do.
I think that's true of our job. So, all right, you appoint this leader, these supposed high flyers are supposed to be so good at man management and control and everything else. All right, well, we don't need them, but at least I might show their face so that you're going to have a bind at them if you think something's wrong. But you don't see anybody, do you?
Not very often. No, that's true.
And that's one of the things I thought the services were good at. They insisted on staff officers in every department visiting every 3 months, and they had an AOC's inspection every year, and anybody the lowest rank would go and speak to the AOC on that day. I know there's a lot of bull and getting ready for it and all that sort of thing, but it kept people on their toes, and everybody saw that AOC. That's what it was all about. He paraded in front of them, so at least they saw him.
Saw their leader.
Don't talk to him. Yeah.
You think that is good? That's good.
I do. I think that is good.
Do you think the service management has really a lot to offer civilian type management?
I'm sure of that. Because what you have to do in the forces is get your men to love you. You've got to get them to follow you to death. Whereas in civilian life, it seems to me it doesn't much matter. You're only worrying about how much you're going to lose or gain or something like that. And they don't think it's as important. But I believe it is important. I believe every man should be happy at his work. I know, and you know, lots of people who can hardly wait to get home. They hate going to work.
That's right.
Well, I don't think anybody should be like that. And I say this to my kids. I say, now, please, try to find yourself jobs and professions that you like doing, that you want to go and do them. It mustn't be a drudge and a worry for you to go.
There's a lot of people doing jobs which they don't like. That's
Sure
true.
enough.
And nowadays, I suppose that's even that's accentuated, really, in the fact that people have just got to get a job, haven't they?
Yeah, anything for money. And, I mean, this strike for the... I don't think we've heard half of what really goes on in those men's minds. I think they must be terribly bitter and twisted. And that's the sort of thing, that sort of job, I think that's where the psychologists need to really get going and try the service technique of getting the leaders loved and to be there on the production lines with them and let somebody have a bind if he's got a fair bind to make. Not to be sissified or soft with them like they were. They were throwing money away, letting people sleep on night shifts and all that stuff. But I don't mean that. I mean, lead them properly. That's what I think.
See, in the service, I mean, you spend a long time in the service and you've done a lot of things in the service. Do you think the system they had in the service was good? I mean, you've said more or less. I mean, the various ranks, the sort of hierarchy, the subordination of lower ranks. Do you think that was is the best way of doing it?
What do they call the system of an RAF station? It's a benevolent dictator, isn't it? Now, that's fine if that benevolent dictator is a fine man and he's you look up to him and he's a decent fellow and he's a good leader. That's fine. But if he's a bad one, it doesn't work very well. On the other hand, some of these horrible, arrogant drivers used to have very efficient stations. I don't know which is the best system, but it seemed to me that the ones that I worked on, where there were benevolent dictators, still dictators though, I think they had the best results. The Gus Walkers of life. People like that that I knew. They were... Gibson. Gibson, another one. I was on his flight. They were drivers. No mistake about that. But they were benevolent drivers. They wanted things right and they led their men. And you did have to follow them to death, didn't you? There's no arguing about it. You did. You followed them.
Well, there's Fulton's thing. It's a bit like this, isn't it? More recent, where the troops went out and did their job perfectly.
That's right.
Presumably, if we'd have sent a lot of civilians out there running the management lines as they do now, you'd think it probably wouldn't have been so successful.
Well, I think the important thing to remember about the Falklands, if you read anything about it, and I read a lot and listened to the talks from different people, that they were beautifully led, weren't they? Their officers led them beautifully and were with them and led the charges and so on. Some people say that they shouldn't have done that. Lieutenant Commander Jones should have been sending the boys forward and not him and so on. But they were properly led, like the paratroopers always have in my knowledge. They jumped out of the airplane as soon as the other fellows and did everything with them. Even the general landed by parachute, the same as they did. And that's the sort of thing that I think is important.
Yeah, I think so too. What about these Germans, you know, that when you were taken prisoner, what do you think of those? I mean, that was your first contact with them, presumably, when you met them on the ground somewhere near 20.
Well, I'd been out with the scouts to Germany and to Holland and Belgium. Oddly enough, I went to Belgium with Ken Little all those years ago, and we're still friends now. And yeah, that was really my first experience of them, and they were lousy bloody people. But you could see why. I mean, I was captured by the German Volksstadt, the Home Guard, and they caught a Terrorflieger who bombed their houses, and who the hell can blame them? I mean, that's reasonably fair, but they were a sort of pious lot in their way. That they were convinced that they were the most marvellous people, but of course that's exactly how Hitler did the thing, didn't he? He said, "You are the cream, you are the best people in the world."
I suppose that was good leadership, really, wasn't it?
Well, it was pretty good leader, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, he damn nearly did it, didn't he? It was only don't forget he was fighting the world. If he'd had picked better allies, he might have done a lot better than he did. But I think that's really what they intended, you know, at first, was to try and get us on their side. And the people like Duke of Hamilton and co, they thought they were going to be on their side as Nazis, and they could swing the British people with them. But I think that's what really they felt at first.
Yeah.
I mean, our politics were terrible at the time, weren't they?
Well, yes.
All
Well,
our
it seems to be. I
politics
don't
were
know too much about it. But,
anti-red they were, and that's all. We didn't have really any policies.
yeah. So now they're bringing out all the sort of new Hitler papers, aren't they, to discuss a lot of them?
Well, I wonder
It'll be
whether
interesting
sure,
to
I
see.
don't know. I think the more we learn and the more we look at, the better it will be. I think it'll be great.
Well, you'd be able to draw your own conclusions because you were there, right?
I don't know whether we'd have any. The only thing, I don't think because you've been a prisoner of war, you've got any better view. Except this. They had a rule in their prisoner of war camps, because they're all hidebound by rules, and they love uniforms and ordering each other about. Even now, they're the same now. The train guard, you'd speak to the brown-shirted man in charge of the train, and the brown-suited man in charge of the train. It's still the same. But I remember they had a rule that said you must not be outside, all the windows must be closed, and you must be inside the huts when an air raid was on. Well, of course, at this time of the war, the air raids were on all the bloody time. And things were, the sirens were blowing on, off, you didn't know what the hell it was. Anyway, this day, we were inside the hut, and I was standing beside a fellow who was peeling whatever vegetables that we'd got, because we used to make 2 meals of them. The peeling station, peel them, fry the peel in oleo margarine, which we got in American Red Cross parcel, and boil what was left. And there were 2 meals, you see.
Oh, I see.
And
very economical.
with the peelings that he'd got in this pan, he jumped out of this low-down window thing to empty them all, to sort of go straight outside that window. And the bloody guard, just at the end, just up and shot him, just like that, bang, and killed him. Right beside me there and then. Now, I mean, the war was bloody nearly over then. And
You're just sticking to his rules.
He'd seen a fellow outside in the day and I shot him. I mean, another one. Of course, they were edgy then. They knew the Russians were on the way, and they knew that they were going to be taken any minute now. Another fella. We weren't allowed out, as I say, in air raids. He just fell open the door, nobody around, turned round to walk back into the block, and was shot on the porchway. That's the way they abide by rules. But you see, just before the Germans left, the senior British officer came to our room. There were 8 of us in a tiny little room. And he'd been taken and put into solitary confinement for, I don't know how long, a long time, but I'm certain he was round the twist at that stage. And they just let him out. Tried to surrender to him. So obviously they were taking English prisoner of war, and he refused, even though he was quite bad and bonkers. And they destroyed that man for nothing, simply because he was the CO when tunnels were being built, and they'd captured this tunnel from our room, which had been dug down under the fireplace and out. But if they'd got here, we'd still have been slaves. Make no mistake about that. There's no doubt in my mind at all we would still have been very subservient to the Germans.
Yeah. You had a different sort of system to what we had, really.
Very different systems. I'm sure that they would have run things probably very efficiently. No doubt that they're possibly very efficient. Well, they're efficient now, aren't they? A lot of the things they do. But they're not bloody marvellous either that people think they are.